That's priority number one right now. All right, it is 5:30. Let's start this meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk please take the roll call?
Councilmember Kleur. Councilmember Collings.
Here.
Councilmember Stearns. Mayor Pro Tem Redmond.
Here.
Mayor Sakwa.
Here. All right, so we have no special presentations today, so we go straight to public comment. We have two people in the audience. I just was curious how many hands raised. Okay. Would anyone like to comment on items that are not on the agenda or actually are on the consent agenda? No takers, okay. Anybody make comments now? Okay. All right, well, public comments section of the meeting is over. Let's go to, do you have the paper? I'm having trouble with my computer, thanks. Council and staff comments, we'll start with the city manager.
Well, let me start with the easy pieces first. The conceptual plan for the proposed layout of what's going to happen on the landing will be coming to the next council meeting. They need to just run this by council to make sure that you guys are copacetic with where they're going, knowing that what kind of development happens out there is going to be shaped by you guys, the planning commission, as well as the community, but they need just that buy-off to start opening the finance spigot and get things rolling. So working with their planners on that, so it'll be here.
So Todd, you mean Pincinel, right?
Yeah, Pincinel Holdings. Let me see. So I hesitate to get into this, but let me lay out. We had our first public finance meeting with the public finance board, and now that we've had that, there's a to-do list of a bunch of stuff just to lay out for council what we need to accomplish. The first thing is we need to engage a company. I've got feelers out for somebody that can produce an engineer's map and a legal description of all the parcels. So everything that's in the EIFD, treat it like as if it's its own parcel. That's in process. We need the draft infrastructure financing plan, which I've got together. I just need to have John Kenny look at it. We then need to create a website that's specific for the EIFD. That's one of the state's requirements for that. And we need to host all our information there. And so we've got the parcel, I've got a parcel list and the map created. We need to then mail ballots to everybody that owns property within the EIFD, and we need majority vote for the EIFD to go forward. And we've got the latest tax increment revenue projections, and then the general fund fiscal impact projections. I'm waiting for the go-ahead from Joe Dieguez at Cosmont, so we can then start our next PFA, hold our next PFA meeting. And that should be coming in the next month or so. And that's it on that. A lot of work to do. The other final piece is sat down with Evelyn Callis and Nolan Tam, and with Ted Marconi was on the call, and we worked through the library expansion plans. There were some final tweaks that Evelyn wanted to see with the plan. So I think we're finally there, and Nolan Tam is sending the plan to the estimators. Now, a lot of us saw preliminary cost estimates for the library, or what we thought were preliminary cost estimates in the $4 million range. That those are just erroneous numbers from a previous project. They just want to show how you lay that stuff out. So that's not what we're looking at. We have no idea what we're looking at yet. And that's it for the big stuff for now.
Okay, so no small stuff? Okay.
Oh, yeah, and then the last piece, just to remind folks that this is the last hybrid meeting that council will be holding. So if you plan to comment, or you to show up at the next council hearing.
Very good. Thank you, Todd. Chief, you have anything for this meeting? And Muriel, you have a lot to talk about later, so we'll move on to council comments. No, John, no? No? Not yet, right? All right, and I'll hold off too. Todd, any committee updates that we should know about?
None.
Okay. Yep. All right, so we have a short consent agenda. Everyone was here at the 13th meeting, correct? All right. Consent agenda. The city manager recommends approval of the following consent agenda items. All resolutions and ordinances on this agenda or added hereto shall be introduced or adopted as applicable by title only, and the full reading thereof is hereby waived. A, approval of minutes for June 10th, 2024, regular meeting. B, approval of disbursements, accounts payable June 13th, 2024, total gross payroll and taxes for period ending June 9th, 2024. C, monthly investment and revenue report. D, committee minutes, beautification committee for May 2024. Like to make a motion, someone?
I will make a motion to approve consent agenda items A through D by title only.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And aye. Any opposed? No. Now we move on to number 8, city manager salary. I have a request from Councilmember Collins to introduce this, and I will graciously allow him to do so. The background real quick, the city council will discuss a potential increase to the city manager's salary, discuss your options, and make a decision whether to approve an increase. You have the floor, Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mayor. There's been a good bit of confusion on this, so I wanted to kind of just start with why am I supporting his salary increase? And I have to start with the kind of the big picture first, because just for briefly about 30 seconds, like, well, why? What does the city manager do? Why do we value this guy? What's his job? And the headline of that is, stagnation is not prosperity. Our population has been stagnant for over 30 years at about 3,300. And the budget analysis has reflected accordingly that for the last 2 years and for the next 2 years, basically flat revenues. And so you gotta kind of look, well, okay, there's gonna be talk later about a sales tax. Well, we need to raise the sales tax to bring more money in. That's a slice. Let's take the slice of the pie and make it bigger, as compared to, well, wait a minute, maybe we need to actually grow the pie. And let's be clear about one thing, because this is kind of what it all boils down to. If city revenue doesn't grow faster than the rate of inflation of prices, then we will continue to have increases in fees to fix the things that need to be fixed in the city, and or service reductions because we simply can't afford them. So how does the city to have balanced, healthy growth? if the sales tax is a long shot to pass, and we just failed to pass a stormwater infrastructure fee increase, the citizens voted that down, you start to get the picture, well, okay, maybe the concept of trying to increase our slice of a stagnant pie has at least some long odds to be successful. Maybe we actually ought to start looking at growing the pie, which means growing intelligently, slowly, the size of the city to increase revenues. The person to lead that is that man. He's the best chance that this town has had in decades, who has the experience to do the planning portions, to work with the planners, to do the economic development portions, to do the planning portions, the public works portions. He's had all of these positions. In New York City and in Portland, he's had senior positions in public works, economic development, and planning. He was the Manhattan Borough Commissioner and in New York City, had a budget of over $500 million. Ours is $6 million. And you want somebody who knows how to have a bigger budget and to think bigger about how to grow something and who's had actual experience doing it. The numbers are reasonably straightforward. We hired Todd 2.5 years ago at $140,000. We gave him a 7.1% raise to $150,000, same benefits. Meanwhile, over the past 2 years, we have given staff somewhere between a 20 and a 32% increase in salary. We have given Todd one raise of 7.1%. I know we're a small town, but the city manager position is the only position that we have to compete nationally for. All of you all will remember we brought people in here from all over the country to interview for that position. And yet if you look at the statistics of California city managers, he's in the 80th percentile, meaning he's in the bottom 20%. If you simply look locally at our closest town that mirrors us, Weed, their city manager makes over $170,000 a year as of last year. It's not a balanced situation, which is why specifically I'm asking for money to have that man stay here, lead slow balanced growth, and help us get out of the revenue or the net loss and deficit positions that we've been in for the past 2 years and appear to be headed to for the next couple of years, especially if we don't pass a sales tax increase, which seems like a long shot. That's the guy to lead us. That's the guy. If you remember all the other city managers, none of them had anywhere near the credentials he does, and understandably, we're a small town. We can't attract talent at that level. We are lucky to have him, and it's not just about him. He has brought in 2 other senior people who are critical to our growth, the planning director and the public works director, who are both here as a direct result of him being here. And for me, that's kind of the bottom line for, oh, okay, we want to offer him a 10% raise this year and a 10% raise next year, which will get him up to where Weed is and nowhere near the state of California or national levels. For me, that it's an easy decision. I didn't go on too long, did I?
No, that's a good introduction.
I tried to keep it short.
Very well said, very well said. So that is the introduction for the agenda item. Let's try to be disciplined about this as usual. And we have clarifying questions from council members.
No.
All right, well, I guess I have a clarifying question. as of right now, at this very moment, do we have a salary increase in mind? We did discuss $15,000 retroactive to January, which would mean for calendar year 2024, and then $15,000 for calendar year 2025. So that was under discussion months ago, actually. So are we in agreement that that's what's under discussion now?
I consider that to be our discussion now. Yes.
Okay, so not surprising. All right, very good. Without any other clarifying questions, let's move to public comment on this. It's considered a comment period, not a hearing, right? So in the House, you have 3 minutes, folks, as name and town of residence. So come on up, Betty.
Betty Krieger, Mount Shasta. The first thing I would like to address is Jeffrey's statement that Todd's salary is 20% of the salaries in California. That depends on how you calculate it. You can't calculate the entire state of California. You have to calculate based on the population. And I did a calculation myself, and so what I did was I went to page 54 of the public pay website that Jeffrey referred us to, and that page has salaries or has populations that are equivalent to Mount Shasta. And 53 has some more. I didn't calculate those, but those are even a little bit lower. And so when I calculated his salary at this moment, I have, as you have noted in my previous email to you, is that I have his salary noted at $150,400 plus $88,000. That was my guesstimate of what his benefits are. So that brings him to 200 and, oh dear, lost my page, 238,000. And so that brings him to 29% above average when you calculate it that way. So he is not at the bottom 20%. When you're calculating with cities like Los Angeles and Sacramento and San Diego, these cities have a large population, and their salary for the city manager is $1 million, $900,000, $500,000. So you can't, that's apples and oranges calculation. So coming back to what Jeffrey said at the beginning, that he made a stagnation comparison and how we need to raise fees and taxes and such. And for some reason, he seems to think that that is a justification for keeping a high salary for Todd, and I don't see it. If you can't get taxes raised and you're in a debt, how are you going to pay a higher salary? That is my big question. But I think that it's dishonest to make a calculation that shows 20% when you're calculating it by the entire state, when in reality it should be calculated by 3,000 people. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Betty. Who would like to speak next? And that's Johanna. Come on up.
Good evening, Johanna Altorfer, Mount Shasta. So I would just like to, I think I sent an email on this the last time around, and I'm sorry I didn't send another one, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is the second raise. There was an initial raise, then there was an additional raise with, there was an initial, thank you, Jeff. There was an initial raise, and then there was a second raise along, I believe, with the other staff, because I distinctly recall there was 2 raises at the beginning, kind of lumped together, and this would be raise 3 and 4. However you slice it and dice it, if he's at if he's got 150 now plus another 30, that's 180. If you look at an average of 35% benefits, and Muriel would know if that's a fair number, it might be higher actually, you're looking at another 63K in benefits. That's 243,000 fully loaded. That's a lot of money. I think he's doing a great job, you know, and I know he's looking out for our community. He's our CEO, I guess, but you know, the revenue doesn't necessarily increase from that. The revenue increases from us having a desirable city and a wonderful place to visit. And I think we need to work on getting our town to be more visitor friendly, and let's keep those building heights lower and keep our scenic vistas and make it more attractive for people to come and visit us. If we're just any old small town overrun with big development, we're not going to be special anymore. And we have a unique situation here. I mean, we're a world destination, for goodness sakes. And I don't think we here in this community always appreciate that. And so I think, anyway, what else? Anyway, I guess that's, well, another point is that, and I think I wrote that in the last letter, was you have to look at the responsibilities for this town. Our last city manager was at 118, so this is going to be at 180,000. So that alone is a huge, I think it's a 52% increase over what the past city manager made. So, I mean, you have to kind of weigh that, and I realize he didn't have the resume that Todd does, but I just feel like we're cutting important things like Avenue 22, which is important for the public, and we're kind of cherry picking what we're cutting. We also had a bunch of consultant fees that we paid for the city planner. I believe that's one of the reasons we're in our deficit, is because we spend so much on consulting. And the one planner did such a poor job that even Todd acknowledged that he wasn't doing very good. And I asked once before, did we ever ask for a refund for part of that money? Like, are we fighting for that? Because that's what I would do.
Thank you, Johanna.
Thank you for listening.
You're very welcome. Thank you for speaking. And do we have anyone else in the hall that would like to come up, speak on this item? Going once, twice, 3 times. No one online. No hands raised. Okay, well, let's bring this back to council for further discussion. Late hand, all right.
I don't know if you have the capability to actually speak online. Doesn't have a microphone. I just arranged it. Leaning's a very nice. I'm not sure if she's going to be able to speak at all. Okay, we have Vicki Gold.
Okay, Vicki, you can start now. Yep.
Mount Shasta. I'm hoping that Shelley can find a way to communicate. In any case, I wasn't going to speak, but I thought I would make a suggestion that you delay the vote this evening. I understand all the points that you've made. I'm not a financial person. I had great difficulty understanding whether Kathy's salary was also part of the administrative salary in the agenda packet. So I'd like clarification about that, because otherwise it looks like it's even larger, like 291,000 or something. And if not, you know, is John Kennedy's part of that as clerk? If you could break that down, I think the public would like to understand that more clearly. What is the administrative, the full staff for administration? Secondly, I think it would be most prudent to wait until you discuss the new taxes, the potential new taxes, whether you're going to put them on the ballot before giving the raise. A smaller raise, and maybe, you know, give a 10% raise now, and then after you decide what to do with the ballot, we'll have a better idea of whether that can be covered or not. you've mentioned that there are fewer federal and state grants. That probably is going to continue from what I can see economically. And it does seem to me that the public is not likely to approve those taxes. So to me, taking Avenue or 22 Avenue off is a slap in the face to the public. The public knows that they're already threatening, oh, there's going to be bird flu, there's going to be another different kind of variety of COVID. They may not want to attend in person, or they've become accustomed to attending remotely, as so many people do. That wasn't the practice previously, but now there are hundreds of Zoom meetings, every day with major organizations. I think there are people in the community who would offer to provide that service, even if it isn't quite the bells and whistles that we have now. I think that is penny wise and dollar foolish, and very unconscious about the public perception when we're going through all of the general plan review, the budget review, the issues with taxation. To do it now and to not wait until at least after the November election, I think is unconscionable, actually. I think that you're going to have a great deal of blowback. What will happen, I don't know, but I would encourage you, if you really believe you want the public to participate, and I'm not convinced of that, then you would find some way to cut somewhere else. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Roz.
Okay, Rosalind, go ahead.
Rosalind McCoy, Mount Shasta. So if the taxes do not get raised, where are you proposing to cut? So this increase in salary can be funded. I understand that we're in a deficit right now. So you just spending money that we don't have is confusing to me. So if you could talk about that a little bit more, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rosalind. And that's it? All right, one last chance for those inside? No. All right, so public comment is closed. We will now bring this back to council to discuss further. Would any council members like to start before I say my piece?
I'm not the financial expert on this council. We have others who are much better at that than I am. On the other hand, I have been on this council for almost 24 years. I've seen a lot of city managers. I've seen a lot of city councils, good people who have spent years of service trying to move the city forward, and have been hampered by the ability to attract really good talent to make it happen. The city council doesn't make it happen. The city staff makes it happen. And at the head of the city staff, the CEO is the city manager. Of all the city managers I have seen over the last 24, actually 26 years or more, maybe 30 years, a long time. I am of the opinion that we have the best city manager that we've had in 3 decades. We have, over the years, had the opportunity to hire qualified candidates, good candidates, who've gone elsewhere and taken other jobs repeatedly because we were not able to pay. Which makes all the difference. Goes back to what Councilmember Collins was saying. It's the progress versus stagnation. We have fewer residents living in Mount Shasta than we did 30 years ago. For years, we talked about the need for increased housing. Yeah, we talked about it. We encouraged our city managers in the past to work on that. We instructed them to work on that. We made goals for them to increase housing by X number or Y number. It didn't happen. But we have a city manager now who is making it happen. We had other goals in the past that we created and that we set for other city managers. And they would say, they would nod their heads or they would say yes. And after the fact, I can remember one city manager said, "Oh, but that was the city council's goal. That wasn't my goal." I can't imagine at this point in time, after decades of watching the city, being part of the city, being part of the city government, a more prudent expenditure than a $15,000 increase for this city manager for this year and $15,000 for next year. I'm wholly in support of that. Todd is not only a hard worker, but he's smart. He's not only smart, but he knows how to get things done. He's not only smart, but he hires smart people. We are blessed because he hired Jeff Mitchum as the planner, as the city planner. We're blessed because he hired Ken Kellogg as the city public works director. We're blessed because of his other hires. And if we feel that we want to continue moving forward and make progress, make economic progress for this community, create more housing for this community, making it a even more desirable place to be, to live, and to come and visit, and to keep it as a special community, ever more special, then from my part, this is how we do it.
Thank you, Tim. Folks, comments?
I want to start with, I agree, I think Todd is a good city manager. My side of the coin isn't about that. I think he is a good city manager and has a lot of promise to bring in growth, including the landing, which is sat for way too long. To me, the timing doesn't feel right. I believe a month or two ago, we sat here and decided to push this off into December, and that will buy us some time to see how the summer goes, if our revenues hit, how the election goes. But to me, right now, it just doesn't feel fiscally responsible to make that decision currently. So my recommendation would be to push this off till December.
Thank you, Tessa. John, thoughts?
For me, some of this is the timing sucks just because so many people now are asking for more money. The unions are wanting more because this was an agenda item. I mean, when it was first here, we had about 30 of them ready to go and, talk. And then, I don't know, just when does it stop? Especially if we're, we are cutting, Avenue 22 or cutting any other city jobs and then doling out this. I don't like the look of get rid of blue collar potentially and give white collar a raise. I've never liked that. I'm not saying that's this, but it can have that look to just the general public. And I want Todd to stay because this town is incredibly difficult to get anything done in. I mean, people can't even build a high school here without people, just doing everything they can to shut down a school being built. So, I mean, he's got his hands full with that, and he's done a good job. He really has. But I don't know where I'm at on this because is he worth it? Yes, but is the timing right? No, I don't think so. Not at all, because here we are, budget talks are 1 minute they're good, 1 minute they're bad. Next email they're good, next email they're bad. And I mean, we're basing everything on hypothesis of, does something pass, does something not pass? We've already got people voting against fixing anything because they don't understand the concept of why the price is the price. I just feel like the timing is bad on this because it's a Pandora's box I was worried about when we started getting everybody up to a proper wage that way years ago. Was that, does it stop or do we just keep coming forward because somebody else got a raise? And then when does it stop? If we give him the raise, the unions want more raise. Does Jeff want more money? Does whoever takes over from Muriel come forward saying, I want more money now? I mean, when does it stop? That's my concern, is when does it stop? And then on top of it, it's just, I don't know, wait another year or something to actually see some economic growth in this town that isn't a damn crystal shop going in somewhere. We don't even have an art gallery anymore because we got to put in singing bowls everywhere. So we need more than that. And anyways, just think about it a little longer.
I don't know, the singing bowls look nice in the window. All right, so
Practical.
I'll finish off this discussion, but first I wanted to get some clarification. The 291 for that department, that includes a lot more than Todd's salaries, right? So can you just quickly tell us what is in that?
There are two individuals in that budget. Deputy city clerk and the city manager are included in that budget.
Okay, very good, thank you. All right, so my thoughts on this have to do in a way with what Mr. Collins and Mr. Stearns have said, possibly with a slightly different angle. So city manager has approximately 2.5 years left on his contract. And it is an at-will contract, meaning that he can leave, we can have him leave. Things don't go the way we want them to or think they should, we can ask him to leave, et cetera, et cetera. However, this particular city manager has started a lot of projects that we asked him to, and he's in the midst of trying to complete them. So I'll give you a couple examples. One is the EIFD formation. It's ongoing, but I essentially consider it complete plus, meaning that there'll be more things done along the way to make that a viable agency or authority to hopefully lead to some really positive results, but it will take quite a bit of time. So that's something that's near completion. However, the landing, which is part of this EIFD, is something that's just getting rolling, just as is the situation with One Shasta and the former Crystal Geyser property that they purchased. Continuity is really important with respect to project completion and probable success. I actually worry about major players stepping out as these projects are going in, and then they would just be abandoned. And we have really banked a lot on these projects regarding growth for the city with respect to population increase in general, which is very important because we have actually declined below 3,200. We might be at 3,222, but anyhow, it's no longer 3,300, it's down in the 3,200 level, and it needs to go more towards 4,000 for the city to be more viable from an economic standpoint. It's also a need to attract businesses, whether they happen to be hospitality-oriented or other. And yes, to a degree, we have enough crystal shops and singing bowl shops and that type of thing, but there's nothing really that the city can do to stop those entrepreneurs from setting up here. So whatever retailer wants to do is what a retailer wants to do, and hopefully they collect the sales tax and forward it accordingly. So anyhow, project management is critical, and we've not really had this type of momentum since I've been involved with the city council. Bruce Pope had he had some interesting projects, one of which I think is kind of problematic, and that's the solar array project. We'll see if that's something Todd has to complete. There's a project on the tail end that Todd has to complete. For instance, the major part of that project is hooking up the solar array at the sewage treatment plant, and Todd's got to finish that. And he's picking up a project from his predecessor in that case. So project management is really critical in general, and I am deeply concerned about that. So I want there to be no disturbance in this momentum at all. The other thing brought up by my colleagues was the team that he has built. And it is apparent to me there's a lot of loyalty and connection between these team members in critical departments and the city manager. And I think that is not to be disregarded or thought of not being important. So I think we need to have an enthusiastic, forward-looking, energetic city manager who feels as if at least the city council is supporting him in what he's doing, and therefore supporting his major department heads and so forth and what they're doing. We did talk about $15,000 for this calendar year. The only change I would like to put forth is I feel more comfortable going with $15,000 for the fiscal year. So in other words, the raise would start on July 1st. It would not be retro. City manager is okay with that. We did talk about making it retro to January 1st. And then the second $15,000 would be for the next fiscal year. So that's where I stand, and that's my offer, so to speak, as the mayor. Anybody's thoughts?
Work for you? Does it work for city manager?
This isn't my item.
He's not in this fight. He's not in this conversation.
You raised a couple of really good points, and you said it better than I could say it, but last night I was swimming at the lake and trying to build up some speed, some momentum, and it only takes one stroke and you break that momentum. I used to row crew in high school in an 8-man shell. It just took one person in that shell, that 8-person shell, plus the crew, plus the coxswain, to be out of step with the others, or what we'd say, catch a crab, meaning pulling the oar improperly. And you can lose the race. You're totally correct that Todd has moved things forward and is moving things forward that we've talked about, that we've given direction to prior city council members, or city managers rather, over a course of 6 years or more. And now it's happening. Because of Todd. I too would hate to see the loss of that momentum. I wrote somebody yesterday about the Kentucky Derby. The lead horse this year got $3.1 million of the $5 million purse. The horse that came in fifth was still in the money, but it got $150,000. We pay star athletes millions of dollars. We pay movie stars, leaders, millions of dollars. Their support don't make as much. We pay leaders in industry more than the workers because they're taking on more responsibility and working longer hours and having to deal with things that workers don't have to deal with. We have already raised the pay substantially for the workers, the city workers in Mount Shasta. I would support going back to January, but if there's not support for that, I would certainly.
Well, no, you can make a motion. So you want to
All
stick
right.
with the original proposal of,
Yes, yeah. I'll make a motion that we
let him make a motion.
go forward with the original proposal to have the pay retroactive to January. 15,000 plus another.
Retroactive
No, it would,
To July 1st? I'll tell you, why don't you make the motion?
well, retroactive January 1st.
Yes, that's what I thought I was saying.
meaning that the $15,000 increase would be for the calendar year.
Versus his contract in November.
Right, and then it's retroactive in that, since we're at the half year,
Yes,
7,500 would be forthcoming now.
yes.
So
That's
try
what
to
I was
word
trying
that.
to
Try
say.
to word that. Go ahead.
Well, thanks. You worded it perhaps clearer than I did.
Okay. Well, is that the motion? I just made the motion, or did you make the motion?
I think I made the motion. You can second it, or I'll second yours.
Second.
All right. So the motion is to go with the original proposal from a few months ago regarding the city manager's salary to have a pay increase, a salary increase for the 2024 calendar year of $15,000, such that retroactively from this date, he would be paid for that portion of the $15,000, and then continue on for the rest of the year. And then in calendar year 2025, we get a subsequent $15,000 raise.
Correct.
And that, so it'd be a raise of $15,000 for calendar 2024 and a $15,000 raise for calendar 2025. That's what was discussed months ago. I wanted to deviate from that and start it on July 1st, but there's enthusiasm here for sticking with the original proposal. And that would take us to December of 2025, and the contract would, at that point, would have approximately 9 months left on it, 9 to 10 months, depending. I'm unclear if the contract starts at signing in September or November when when the city manager actually started working. So essentially, 2026 would be negotiable. Is that the motion?
That is, and it was
All right,
second.
and then second. All right, so we'll do a roll call vote on this, City Clerk.
Councilmember Kluwer,
No.
Councilmember Collins,
Yes.
Councilmember Stearns,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Redmond,
No.
Mayor Stacklet.
Yes. All right, so we'll move on to number 9. approval of the two-year budget for fiscal years 2025 and 2026. And Muriel Terrell has the floor regarding this item.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before you is the 2024, 25, 25, 26 fiscal operating budgets for all funds. This is a final report, as we're required to have our budget in place before the end of the fiscal year, going into the next fiscal year. This is basically the same report that you received at the last meeting, with an adjustment for the drainage fund shortfalls being paid for through the economic enhancement fund, and whatever shortfall from that with the general fund, which is about $15,000 shortfall. So it didn't hit the general fund too hard, at least at this point. So those are the only differences from the last time, unless you want me to go further into some other things. It's up to you.
Yeah, clarifying questions.
Several people brought this up, that the clerk has, if I remember the numbers correctly, $1,680 for a salary, but $25,000 in benefits and other professional services. And
What is this for?
The city clerk.
Not deputy.
And I went,
Oh, but that's
I don't know what the 25
the election expenses?
oh, in other words, so election expenses
Yeah, we're in a
run
general,
through that
we're going to be
position.
in a, yeah, absolutely. We're in a general election year, so that's where it would be run through.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right. Clarifying questions on the budget? Okay, this is a public comment time, correct? All right. Audience members that would like to speak about the budget, please come up, name and city of residence. All right, looks like Johanna is going to come up. All right.
Hi, Johanna Altorfer, Mount Shasta. So it doesn't sound like 22nd Avenue was adjusted in the budget. And I would like to ask that we keep 22nd Avenue, because I think it's really important, not just for the public, but for our community to grow. And everyone has expressed a desire to grow. I have witnessed numerous wonderful presentations and consultants coming here to present to us in person. And if we start doing that, if we take this away, we're going to lose those opportunities. People may say, it's too difficult to deal with Mount Shasta. They're in the third world because they can't use technology, and so we'll just ignore them and we'll go to another town that does offer these kinds of things. Because if we have to reimburse them to come here, and I think, Todd, you've even spoken to this, that 22nd Avenue is saving the city a lot of money. Otherwise, we have to reimburse some of our consultants to come here. Now, okay, so, that's like one thing. And then, again, I'd like to say, I would like to see some reimbursement from all the high consultant fees that we've been paying out, and they weren't doing their job. And I think we need to manage that as well, because if they're not doing their job and we're just shelling out all this money, that's not okay. And as far as the progress not happening, I think a lot of that is because I actually think Starbucks was a really good thing, and it's bringing traffic in, and we need to do development. I think the landing is going to be great. But I've heard a lot of people comment on developer fees are too high, and permit fees, and timing, and there's a lot of issues around that. So I think we need to look at this in a holistic, 50,000-foot view picture, not just pick and choose what we want to look at to
Oh, and like, I just wanted to say, by increasing all of our prices and our budgets, and this kind of impacts this. Like, I used to love to come to the bookstore, the old used bookstore on northbound Shasta Avenue with my kids. We loved that place. And stores like that are priced out of this town because everything is going up, 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 up. We're making it too expensive for these unique businesses to operate in our town. And so I think we need to kind of keep that in sight. We are not the Bay Area, we are not Los Angeles, we are Mount Shasta. And with that comes a slightly different territory. And I don't know, anyway, I had some other thoughts, but I'm out of time here, so thank you for listening.
Thank you, Johanna. And Betty, you going to speak? I am. Okay.
I didn't know I was, but I am. I would like to just second what she had to say about the Second Avenue. And my reason is because for quite a long time, well over a year, there was many times that I couldn't even leave my apartment because I was so disabled. And I know that other people are like that as well, maybe not as many, and maybe not as bad as I was, and maybe worse than I was. But it would have been extremely difficult for me to be able to contribute or pay attention to, except after the fact, about city council meetings and planning commission meetings. So I think it's really, really important that we keep that here for everyone. And maybe not a lot of people use it right now, but especially when there are huge issues, like, for instance, Crystal Geyser. As you recall, the room was full when we were discussing Crystal Geyser. And my guess is that if we had had 22nd Avenue so that people could zoom in, it might have even been fuller. And so I would really encourage you to do whatever it takes to keep 22nd Avenue. Thanks.
No, sorry. All right, in the auditorium, anybody else for 3 minutes on the budget? Really? Okay. All right, let's bring this back for further discussion. Closing public comment on this item. Further discussion amongst the councilors. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
In your adjustment of the 22nd Avenue budget, is there still a Zoom portion that links in with that?
No, it's just recording. However, we have the ability, with enough notice, to have them do this type of meeting. We would need at least 72 hours notice. For instance, if you have a special presentation or those kinds of things happening, of course at an increased fee, but that per your direction, it was reduced to the recording of the meetings like have been done previous to COVID.
Maybe I'm asking the wrong person. City manager and deputy clerk, will somebody like Betty, and there's many people who can't make it to the meeting for all kinds of good reasons, will they be able to watch the meeting either live through Zoom or later on a recording?
My understanding is they will be able to watch it live on YouTube, but they will not be able to publicly comment on anything from home.
So there's no call-in?
Correct.
We had that long before 22nd Avenue. How come? Where somebody called in on a phone and no? We didn't. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so with respect to Studio 22 Avenue, the relationship doesn't end. We're still hiring them to do a partial job. if the budget situation improves, they can be hired back to do the full-blown, full-scale service that they're doing now. So I hope everyone can understand that. It's not, and we're not permanently cutting them off from doing business with us. Anyhow, go ahead.
Yes, we, the council members, chose to go with a hybrid solution having to do with 22nd Avenue. The city manager is the one who brought 22nd Avenue and has been strongly supportive of 22nd Avenue throughout. And I think he would, as much as anyone, like 22nd Avenue to continue full bore. We have cut that back somewhat, but as the mayor indicated, we can go back to full bore, if you would, in the future as appropriate. There are opportunities that we take throughout the year to make budget adjustments. And every year we have a mid-year budget adjustment meeting where we have that as a major agenda item for our meetings. So we are not doing away with 22nd Avenue. And as the finance director said, there's opportunities to have this type of meeting for 22nd Avenue for particular meetings. So I think 22nd Avenue has been important, is important, and I anticipate in the future we will see more of 22nd Avenue.
To the chair.
Go ahead.
But as of right now, there's no approving this budget with them involved.
No, they are involved. They're scaled back.
Just scale back, okay.
More comments? All right, so I'll close out the comments at this point with this. You know, these budgets are changeable due to many different reasons. It could be on the expense side, we decide we need to spend some money. We are forced to spend money for something we didn't expect. And then there are interesting situations where snow at elevation, but not here in Mount Shasta, therefore we don't spend $90,000 on snow plowing like this past year, which was helpful. So things like that make a difference in a budget as the year goes on. Also, more on the revenue side, I think things like fires hurt our tourism trade. And if we don't have fires that affect Mount Shasta, things go a little better with respect to our revenue reflected in hotel taxes and sales taxes. So there are certain things that are out of our control, and we'll see how it goes this year. Being intimately involved with the actual retail environment here in Mount Shasta, it seems that we're off to a good start. We're ending the fiscal year now, and there's, to me, seems to be a lot of activity, tourist type of activity, visitor type of activity here, and we'll see how the rest of the summer goes. And then so-called shoulder seasons, we have really good weekends if the weather's nice in the fall, and then things can be okay if we have a good ski season, although weirdly enough, it wasn't that great this past year, even though they had a good ski season. Didn't really help us too much, but we shall see. Hopefully, Muriel's conservative estimates of revenue are again too conservative, but that remains to be seen. So, yeah, so go out there and buy stuff and pay sales taxes, right? With that said, would someone like to make a motion to pass this budget, please?
Make a motion to,
Stop.
I'd like to, with the motion, please amend the motion to include the previous item that increased the city manager's salary, so I can include that in the finalized budget, please.
Okay.
move to approve the proposed operating budgets, all funds for fiscal years 24-25 and 25-26, and amended to include the previously agenda item on number 8 for $15,000 for 20, well, they're different years, 23, 24, and 24, 25. Okay.
And that's resolution CCR 24-18. I will second that motion.
All right, so we have a motion with amendment. We have a second. Is the clerk satisfied with the motion? Okay, this is important. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And aye. Any opposed? All right. Let me borrow this again for a second. Way ahead on this. All right. We are moving on to discussion on possible action on whether to pursue, okay, so this is purchasing the parcels at the former Beers Auto site, in particular the grassy fields versus the building and parking lot, and the city manager has the floor on this one.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
For those that don't remember, we subleased 415 North Chestnut Street to do environmental due diligence to potentially purchase one or all three of the parcels at this location, keeping in mind that ultimate goal for the city is to daylight Castle Creek, number one, and the other is to create a southbound couplet on Mount Shasta Boulevard and on Chestnut Street. And if we were to create that couplet, one, we would, should I let this pass? Yeah. So if we were to create this couplet on Mount Shasta Boulevard and on Chestnut, we would have to move towards angled-in parking. We would have to sell this geometric change on both roadways as an active transportation project, so we'd have protected bike lanes, so it was limited in terms of where we can park. Having angled-in parking means that we would lose some parking on Chestnut, and the two unpaved parking lots that are connected to the structure on 415 North Chestnut is part of what we were looking at for the idea of overflow parking. We were also looking at these two parcels for overflow parking in relation to the creation of a park with the daylighting of Castle Creek. So again, tied the two unpaved parcels up as well as the structure. The idea was maybe we could purchase this and entice someone to come in and redevelop this parcel for a use. Someone floated the idea of a restaurant that would be turned away from holding the street line on Mount Shasta, more to catch rooftop views of the mountains. So fast forward, since the sublease, we've got these properties subleased through the end of August, and we performed a phase 1 environmental, and I'm going to walk through the findings on the structure itself first. The facility, as many of you know, was a car repair proprietorship with various owners since 1982. The phase 1 showed remnant of underground hoist, clogged floor drains and service bays with sludge and pooled liquid, a plastic 55-gallon drum of unidentified substances, 300-gallon waste oil found in the southwest corner of the structure. There was a concrete and masonry block containment basin filled to overflowing with a dark liquid, a 55-gallon drum of waste antifreeze, and historic records show that there was hazardous materials use on the site. In fact, there was an agency that opened a leaking underground storage tank investigation of the site. They found on soil sampling petroleum, hydrocarbons, gasoline, and diesel, but they did eventually come back and say that the Regional Water Quality Board determined that the materials that they found on that site related to a leaking underground storage tank couldn't have come from that tank, and the tank wasn't leaking. But we still have a lot of mess. The commercial appraisal is being written right now. We're going to have it early. We were supposed to have it last Friday. We'll have it this week. We're looking at, as if the property was not contaminated and we could use it for the highest and best use, and there was no cleanup involved. We're looking somewhere around $400,000. The issue is I hired a firm to give me an estimate on remediating just the structure itself. They gave me an estimate of between $400,000 and $500,000 with the idea that it's very likely once they got in there, it could be as much as $1 million. So it's going to have negative equity. So let's move on to the two unpaved parcels at the back. We had a commercial appraisal done, that's back. This assumes that these two parcels could be used for the highest and best use and there's no contamination. It was for $100,000. They also found, the presence of hydrocarbons. As we all know, that site has been used for a year for parking vehicles in various states of disrepair. And a lot of them, assume that they're leaking. The groundwater stores in that location are about 6 feet below that parking lot. Hydrocarbons, gasoline, diesel, unless it's in extremely large quantities, tend to get tied up in the soil. I hired an engineering firm, GPRS, to come in and perform ground penetrating radar. And this was for the purposes of identifying whether or not there are buried tanks there. There are not. So that's good news. Ultimately, the way this lot has been used for parking, we could come in and use it for the same thing without much issue. But I think to be prudent, one of the things that we should do before we were to make an offer to the owner, and who knows if he'll take it, is for us to do borings at that location and find out at least 3 different locations to see if there is any contamination of that groundwater. And if there is, we need to evaluate that. If there isn't, what that does, it demarcates in time that when, if we were to purchase this property, we come to, a reasonable value for this, we purchase it from the owner, that if we use it for parking, we have a baseline so we know there was no contamination there. And somebody can't come in and claim, they could dump at night and claim that it's now contaminated and the city's on the hook for a whole ton of money. So my suggestion is that we move forward with water testing, groundwater testing at that site with soil borings, and try to get that done, obviously, before our sublease is over by the end of August, and then make an offer to the owner if we're in the clear for, for an amount that takes into account the phase 1 that we performed, the ground penetrating radar, and the groundwater testing, and any other write-off that we think that we should have, given that we can't use this parcel for the highest and best use, given that the commercial appraisal for this site is, hey, if we came in, this is perfectly clean, we could build it to 4 stories commercial in that location. So that's what I have, and I'll let you guys debate. Let me know what direction you want to take.
All right, well, clarifying questions, let's go. This needs clarification for sure.
Is there any responsibility to the previous tenant for leaving all of this behind? That seems not in the best business use.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I can't see him selling it to anyone else unless the site was cleaned up. I mean, because, there's negative value there, and even with that negative value, if you came upon a price of value for that site, until you get in there and try to remediate it, you don't know what you're in for. What they're talking about right now, at minimum, is excavating the entire site down 6 feet and then hauling that dirty dirt off to the closest location, which is in Red Bluff, which is insane. Based on the estimate, is at least 30 full truckloads.
And what is our responsibility for that timeline to apply pressure to the owner to go to litigation or whatever it needs to do to receive that and get it out of here before more damage is done? Do we have?
Well, because we don't have an ownership interest, we can't show that we've, when you take something to court, you have to show that you suffer damages in some way. And we haven't. If we were to purchase it and we found out there was more there than we knew and we signed off on, if we were to purchase it, then we could apply pressure. But until somebody actually purchases the parcel or contamination from that site starts to significantly impact nearby sites, we don't really have a, you can bring an action for anything. We see that in Mount Shasta all the time, but not likely to prevail.
I like the idea of the testing, doing the boring first.
And that would be on the fields, where you're strongly suggesting we forget about the parking lot / building, right? That parcel.
The paved parking lot in the structure itself, I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Right, so it's the other two parcels.
Yep.
So the field, so we're talking about the
Yeah.
field. Okay, questions? Okay.
As best you can determine with the studies that you've done so far, with the exception of the drill down 6 feet, get into the water table and determine what its current status is, if we hypothetically settled on $100,000 for a purchase price for both of those lots, is that per lot or for both lots?
For both lots.
Okay. Would we be clear to use it, pave it over, and use it as a parking lot?
We would. We would be able to use it for the same thing. The issue of doing the water sampling and boring is to understand whether we're walking into a potential liability situation where we need to clean it up right now because it is impacting the groundwater.
Right. But outside of that, which, my 10 cents would be certainly proceed with that, but.
Yeah, and I would never offer them the full appraised value because we've A, had to do all this testing, and B, we can't use it for anything zoning would allow us to use it for. The only thing we can really use it for is AKA a parking lot. I mean, unless we were to remediate the entire site and dig it out, which gets to the same situation. I talked to an estimator again, and that site, if we were to fully remediate it, we'd be in the 500,000 range again, having to pull all that dirt out. If we wanted to, that gets to the argument of how clean do you want a site. One of the arguments over the Love Canal situation is, the EPA pushing developers that came in, well, how clean do you want it? Do you want it so it's a reasonable, set of people in that neighborhood are not going to get sick from it, or do you want to spend 3 times the amount to get it to that point, to get it to a point where if a kid ate, a half a teaspoon of that dirt, they might suffer some ill effects. And so, to get it fully clean, and, we don't know once we get in there, but $500,000 probably minimum, and we don't know what else once we are in there, how much it's fully going to cost.
But those costs wouldn't apply to us if we were simply going to use it for its current.
As long as we don't have, solvents that can leak into the water table, hydrocarbons, diesel, gasoline, and the like, they tend to get, tied up in the soil and they stay put. If we were to cap it, we'd be fine. But we need to check to make sure that, we don't have anything that's getting into the water table from that site.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Stearns? All right. I don't think I have any questions. Having dealt with this quite a bit, I'll just, no, wait till after public comment. So public comment on this item? Betty?
I don't know if you want to answer this or not, but it sounded to me like y'all just want to use this for a parking lot. And if that is true, is there a reason to spend a lot of money doing the things that Todd talked about? I'm guessing not. If all you want to ever do, ever, is use it for a parking lot. Or do you want to sell it to somebody so that they can build a big building? And if that were the case, then I guess that whoever purchases it would have to may have to do some cleanup. And that would be a thought, for future. That's all.
All right, thank you, Betty. Anybody else inside? Okay, we're going to close public comment on this item, and I'll start off with a few discussion points. This particular possible purchase is key to a couple of projects that have been under discussion for almost a year, and that would be the daylighting of Castle Creek and Tom Heselton's general restoration plan for Castle Creek. He's made it pretty clear that the holdup on that for decades has been the loss of parking. And he looks at this as an opportunity. He's very enthusiastic about getting grants. He thinks, from his public comments, that grants are available for this type of mitigation, stormwater mitigation through federal factors. And I like his enthusiasm about that, but it seems that the key, the linchpin to moving forward is having some additional parking. So these two particular parcels, and then the parking lot on the northwest corner of Alma and Mount Shasta Boulevard are, in his view, I hate to speak for him, key to helping improve the parking situation after the loss of parking from the Castle Creek restoration and daylighting project, and possibly from the one-way couplet project, although the hope there is in the rearrange of the street directional flow, there'll be parking added in that, particularly on the boulevard. There'll be more parking, or at least net out to zero, because we're going from parallel, at least on one side, parallel to diagonal parking. So he's got those pretty well figured out and can talk at length about it. But this is a key item in the overall hope of making those potential projects come to fruition. So my suggestion would be to, yes, one, do the borings, and then two, try and find the money to buy it if this owner is interested in selling. And then the third possibility would be, what about just leasing it, doing a ground lease forever, kind of forever, for many years. And so to give up on this particular acquisition is to me give up on a lot. So I think we should move forward.
Through the chair.
Yeah.
So I certainly support doing the groundwater testing, which is the natural next step. The reason for doing the groundwater testing is to see what the situation is, what the city's potential liability and potential costs might be going forward. So I'm wholly supportive of staff moving forward with that. Yes, I think we abandoned the idea of dealing with the building and the paved lot. So support groundwater testing of the APN numbers 150 and 180.
More thoughts?
Yeah, I think we don't need a motion, just general direction, and so I agree with what's been said so far.
So we have consensus of moving forward, next step being boring testing?
Yep, can do.
Okay, and you're agreeing. All right, so there you go. Let me scroll forward here. I'll just go to paper real quick. Thank you, John. Oh, this is a pretty straightforward one. All right. City manager will have the floor regarding the sale of a fire department utility pickup and purchase of a new utility pickup. And right away, the question is going to be, is this included in the budget?
I believe that it is.
Okay, go ahead, Todd.
Sorry.
Yes.
I know a little bit more about this, Mayor, so I'm going to go ahead and
Okay.
introduce this one here. So essentially, with the grant from CAL FIRE, the fire department got a trailer and a skid steer. So to do, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically cut the brush down, masticating around the city. Well, they found out that the utility they have is not capable not to safely pull the trailer. It's putting too much pressure on the engine, the transmission and stuff. So what they've done is they've, the utility that they currently have, they've found a buyer for that's willing to purchase that utility for $35,000. And with that money, along with money from Measure A fire funds, they would purchase a new utility that is capable of pulling the trailer and the skid steer to where they need it to make it work throughout the city without destroying or damaging the pickups and the utilities. And they would have a maximum cost of not to exceed $85,000 for the expenditure for the new utility.
Questions? Clarification, questions?
Just a question or clarification for Muriel. This would be coming out of the Section A funding that is, or the Prop A funding for Measure A funding, thank you, that has been existing for some time, specifically for the fire department, correct?
That is correct.
You have to run?
And it is in the budget. I had to go look.
It's not coming out of the general budget. It's not affecting the general budget. It's coming out of funding that is already in place for this sort of acquisition.
Very good clarification there for everyone interested. Mr. Collins? Ms. Clore? All right, have a good night. All right, so public comment on this one. Anyone in the audience like to speak about these purchases? Sale and purchase? And to the internet, all right. Bring us back to council for further comment or motion.
Resolution CCR-24-19, a resolution of the City Council, the City of Mount Shasta, appropriating funds from the Fire Assessment Tax Fund not to exceed $85,000 for the purchase of a new utility pickup and tow capabilities and approving the surplus of a 2013 fire utility vehicle.
Second.
Great. All those in support of this, please say aye.
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 And aye. Any opposed? All right. Moving on to the potential tax measures. And city manager will lead the way on this particular discussion. Go ahead, Todd.
At the, let's see, was it the last meeting? The last meeting, the drainage impact fee did not pass. That was to shore up, to replace failing and crumbling infrastructure as well as maintenance and operations. So there was a discussion at that meeting of, okay, so given that that measure had not been increased since the early 80s, it just hasn't been picked up by previous city managers, and that was a lot of money to swallow for many residents. The proposal was to float potentially another measure that was to raise by up to $5 a month for residences, $7 for other property owners, just to raise enough money to keep us rolling with maintenance and operations. And then there has been some discussion of different ways of approaching potentially a sales tax measure. There's been some messaging on a full 1% sales tax increase, a 0.5% tax increase. I believe a 0.5% tax increase would net $400,000 a year. I've heard some mention of going out instead for a public safety measure, which would require a 2/3 vote, with the understanding that our general fund, the entire cost of our general fund is borne, 60% of it with police, fire, and code enforcement salaries, and that by having a dedicated tax for public safety, that would free up some ability to move with the general fund. You know, my only commentary on this, and it's just take it for what it's worth. My concern is trying to get it on the November ballot. We had the drainage impact fee not pass, and especially when it comes to a sales tax increase, you need a substantial period of time, usually with business groups and members of the public, to educate them on what needs to actually happen and why, and what are the buzzwords that would, and uses, frankly, that would entice people to say, yes, I'm willing to put some skin in the game and make sure that the city's whole when delivering a certain set of services. So that's what I've heard, and I guess that's just leading off a discussion amongst council to say, hey, what makes sense and how do we move forward?
All right, well, I'll start off the clarifying questions by just confirming that if we're going to put anything on the ballot, it has to be done by beginning of August. So we don't really have much time to make a call on this. And I'll save further comments till after public comments. So, clarifying questions? All right, public comment on potential tax increases or fee increases here in the audience. Okay, Johanna, go ahead.
Johanna, I just have some questions. This is the first time I've heard of the $5 and $7 increases. And, this is the first time I've heard of the $5 and the $7 increases. And I'm trying to understand what that's for. I was trying to understand before what the storm drainage fees, like my property, I had no idea what my fee would be because I fell into the other category, not the flat rate category, and I still to this day don't know what that is. And so I want to understand what we're talking about because there's a lot of...
Okay, I'm going to cut in on this. So one option for the storm drain fee is to go directly to the ratepayers. And one option, unlike the one we chose, is to go directly to the ratepayers for an up or down vote on this. However, I think it's a 2/3 majority there too. So any fee would have to be pretty low. But $1 is pretty low. So the discussion is whether we want to approach this at all, go directly to ratepayers, so that wouldn't be parcel owners per se, to be people that get to have that little $1 charge on there.
So I agree. I think you've seen in my letters, I think $1 is ridiculously low. That should be higher. I do agree it should be a higher rate. I do believe, though, that the reason the storm drainage thing failed was because, at least why I didn't agree with it, is because it included operating costs as well and capital costs, and it went on for forever. And I think
I forget how many millions of dollars we were going to collect from the taxpayers that
But
live here that
again,
are
I'm
on
going to cut
fixed
it. I'm
incomes.
going to cut in. I'm going to break with protocol here. Yeah, your numbers were right, that it would raise that many millions of dollars, but it probably wouldn't cover all the drainage
Yes. So,
improvements
like,
that we needed.
I would be in favor of having, you know, we had 3 identified projects that had costs to it and 2 that had unidentified costs to it. I think we should, like, in my mind, I estimated those costs at the higher number of one of the other ones. And if you kind of like play that out and roll it forward, I had some numbers that would show how much we're collecting. And the problem is that these funds, if they go to operating and maintenance costs, that's mixing apples and oranges, because we should only be raising funds with the voters for capital costs. I mean, charge them for their, you know, some monthly increase for operations, that's reasonable, but to have these really high increases needs to be just for the capital costs. Otherwise, you're going to be pricing everybody out of Mount Shasta, and we already have a housing issue. So anyway, so I guess I'd just like to understand that more. So that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else in the audience? Okay, so we're going to close public comment on this item, bring it back to council. I'm just going to clarify for those interested. All our rate increases with respect to our utilities, so to speak, also known as enterprise zones, also known as business-like activities, all those rate increases cover both operating costs and debt payments or capital costs. How you account for them, there's specific ways you're supposed to do that. We're not going to get into that conversation. But the fees, water fee, the sewer fee, certainly the garbage collection fee, pay for the operation of the system. And in addition, where there's debt, the fees pay for that too. So it's both. And with respect to this drainage fee, which failed, and by the way, the response rate was really low. So it's like we didn't really have a quorum on this. There were 1,600 ballots went out, and we got 247. Thank you. That's not a big response rate. So we're not allowed to market things, so it's really difficult to, you know, generate interest. Anyhow, those fees would have covered both the cost of operating a system, which Raftel is estimated at $40,000 a year, but the majority of the money would have gone to cover the capital costs in that example. But real quick, this particular suggestion, in lieu of that failure, is only going to be for maintenance of the system, because if we collect an average of $5 instead of the $1 per ratepayer, it's going to bring in about $125,000 instead of $24,000. And there's so many problems, so many fix-it projects that would need to be done weekly, monthly, whatever. Hopefully no really horrendous failures, but that money would all go to maintenance, regular maintenance and operations. Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, just to clarify that, you know, these drainage impact fees, clearly it was too much for the folks that voted to bear. But if you are doing capital increases de facto, that means you need to perform operations and maintenance on those projects. And if you've got something that's newer, it actually takes less to maintain it. The operations are still the same. It takes more money if you're dealing with crumbling infrastructure, because you have things like root intrusions and you know, grease, you know, boluses and that kind of thing. But you know, based on the response, the only thing I think that we can prudently do with drainage right now is come up with a fee that's extremely moderate or pretty low that people can absorb, to help us limp away along the way that we have been and just pay for those operations and maintenance of what we have.
When we get to future agenda items, I'm going to suggest a alternative, and that is that we plan to have the stormwater drainage fees put on a special election June of next year. I think that would be a better overall approach.
That would be a special election because it would be no general type of election, right?
Right. But it would be, rather than being a piecemeal sort of thing or a stopgap measure, it would be a more systematic approach. And we would also have time to educate the public as to why that would be needed and why they ought to support it. So I'm not in favor of putting anything on this November ballot because we just don't.
For drainage?
For drainage, yeah.
So do you have in mind doing something akin to what we just did, but better?
Yes.
Okay.
To the chair.
Yeah.
I would agree with what Councilmember Stearns is saying, and also adding on perhaps a 1% sales tax on the same ballot. What is the price difference in election between a general election and a special election for doing these things?
Quite a bit, actually.
The answer is it depends. On how many other people in the county are also doing special elections. So, because the election cost is shared by the number. So if there are other people doing that, that makes our cost lower. If we're the only one, we do the whole thing.
What's the worst case?
What's the maximum?
Listen, I'm thinking of the library, and I want to say that the library was like $45,000, something like that.
And we just did the hotel tax, and that was like 33 or 23, something like that. So, but Tim's not talking about a county-led ballot.
I thought he was.
He's talking about doing what we just did, a city hall mailed-out ballot again.
Well, if we can do the mail-out ballot, but then if there has to be an election, then we can have the June election do a special election. But you can't expect us to be successful if we only have a few months to get something passed.
No, what the city manager and I are hinting at is making it so low that it's just, oh, yeah, we can handle that. So if it needs to be $3, no, I've been talking to a lot of people. They're in the $3 to $5 range.
The problem,
per month.
The problem with a special election is how do we get the voters to go vote is my concern.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of participation in November. So
Yeah.
you'll have a good statement by the people as to how they feel about these things. And I can tell you right now, they're not liking that $14 to $28 program that Ralph says. Now, that would have solved our drainage problems long-term, but we're talking about just getting from $24,000 a year to maybe $100,000 a year, maybe $75,000 a year, so that the drainage problems don't tap into the general fund and the actual expenses related to drainage are contained within the funds raised by the drainage fee.
I hear that, and you'd also have to, the city would also have to come back at another date because that small increase is not going to fix the problem. It's not going to be adequate.
I don't know, $75,000 a year might go a long way if you just do problem by problem. We'd have to have Ken Kellogg here to say, how would $75,000 do?
You know, I'm looking at the projects that we have, and an inexpensive one is, $4 to $5 million. They're expensive.
So are you talking about Cold Creek on Mount Shasta Boulevard?
Yeah.
That's $4 to $5 million?
Yeah.
Oh, just that section?
Well, we'd have to compare notes. I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but they're, actual reconstruction projects are.
Oh, no, they're very expensive. I'm just talking about digging up the pipe and replacing it and try to level the road.
Yeah, no, that's more in line with reasonable, but we've got areas that are, that the road is just about to cave.
Right.
Yeah.
No, my hope would be that this would pass. Let's say we were to do it. It
Yep.
would pass, and you'd be able to have some funds in that particular, in the drainage fund to cover basically our staff working on these things, like they did when things collapsed in that Coal Creek area on the east side of the road, and they were there for 2-3 weeks fixing it. But, all right, so drainage fee-wise, we want to wait and figure this out versus throwing it up there on November? Because we're going to get to sales tax here real quick.
Yeah, I'm worried that without people making a huff about it in the town's favor, people won't show up to vote
Are you saying that
in a special election.
Oh, so you want to wait 2 years until the next?
Well, I don't know. That's my hesitancy. It's like when you go eat at a restaurant and you have a bad meal, it's the bad meal people that are going to leave a Yelp review and not the good meal people. So
Yeah.
we need to get the good meal people to come out and vote.
do you want to put it on this November's?
I would like to look and see what that looks like, yeah. Is it worse to rush it and get it on the general election, or to wait and not be able to market it and not have a canvassing group and potentially lose the special election?
And Mayor, is it your position that if the number's low enough, like $5 or $4?
I'm actually a little bit afraid that $5 isn't low enough for people, but yeah, that needs to be down in that range for people to pass it. And I'm pretty positive for 2/3 if you go direct to the ratepayers. So
what number do you like?
Well, 5 or less for residential ratepayers. Yeah,
Even less than 5?
possibly, yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess.
I think a $7 fee for commercial, I don't think that'll be too hard to swallow. And I think compared to what we were talking about, there'll be much relief because folks like Chris Maroney, they were major sticker shock. I think the commercial side of that rate study had the commercial fees really high. They weren't really described in detail, but I think they were high.
It just depended on how much land you owned.
Right. Well,
May I ask a question to Councilmember Stearns?
yeah.
Councilmember Stearns, would you be okay with a $5 drainage fee just to cover operations so that we start building up?
I would not, because I think anything worth doing is worth doing right. And I hear you about the election, the special election. The library was a special election, if I recall correctly.
Right, but they had a group of people out canvassing for them.
And I encountered any number of people who said, yes, I was supportive of the rate increase, but just not this rate increase. I think everybody understands, and we can make them understand further over the next year, so it becomes well-known what is being asked for and why and what the costs are. And as I suggested, showing some pictures. And if it's the sort of thing that is discussed on a regular basis, I think it's the sort of thing that will pass, maybe with not the same numbers that people were presented to, but with a more adequate number than $5 or $7, which is not going to be sufficient to fix the problems.
Can I ask a question?
Well, I think we should have Ken Kellogg comment on that. So we'll make it a future agenda item to have Ken here to discuss what direction we should go on regarding the stormwater. Is that a good resolution to this?
It is, but
Okay.
I think that there's two separate things that are being not agreed upon. One is the timing, two is the rate. So I'm worried if we push it off for timing, because Councilmember Stearns wants a higher rate, that not everyone will agree on that increased rate, and then we may miss the opportunity that we could have had in November.
Right, so let's have one very thorough discussion about it that will, so basically I'm creating a future agenda item at our next meeting in July. We have to make a decision quickly if we're going to put this on the ballot or do something in November or postpone this to a future date. And I think we need someone like Ken that can say, well, yeah, if it's just a matter of fixing problems as they come along or the ones we actually know and just fixing them versus more thoroughgoing or grandiose plans like a full drainage system installed on Washington Street. Okay, that is a $6 million project. This money, the money I'm talking about here, is not going to do that.
Patching versus fixing.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're talking major improvements. That's what the REF lease rate study was about, versus tapping the general fund for the repairs. Yeah. All right, so let's postpone that till an agenda item on July 9th? 8th. All right, so back to...
Actually,
July
I will
8th.
not be here on July 8th. Could we do it the following meeting?
Yeah, we've got to, if we were going to do it, the deadline is in early August.
Yeah, we have to do it on the 8th.
Have to do it on the 8th?
How about having a special, how about having,
Do we have Zoom? Are we done?
No, this is the last Zoom.
I can attend remotely.
Yeah, we've got to get to it. We're either going to do something in November, or we're going to do something that Tim is suggesting, a special election later regarding drainage. We need information from the person who hopefully has detailed numbers regarding the drainage system, and take it from there. All right, sales tax. So there's two options. One, to be honest, my suggestion is actually 1/4 to Muriel's 1%. Muriel is suggesting 1%, as you may have read in her budget.
Yeah.
And Todd is suggesting, he hasn't attached a number, but he's suggesting a dedicated sales tax increase to cover specific costs, which is going to require 2/3.
Or a half cent.
No, you didn't mention the percentage, but you're thinking of having a dedicated sales tax for safety, fire, police, and so forth. And that, whatever the rate is that you're suggesting, is going to require 2/3 because it is specific versus general. So for the public, if we do a general sales tax increase, the requirement is 50% plus 1. The money goes into the general fund to be used in differing ways. If you going to dedicate a sales tax to strictly fire, police, dispatch, code enforcement, then that will require a 67 or 2/3% favorable vote. Much tougher level to achieve. So let's discuss this. I will just make some suggestions. The 1/4 sales tax was what the library, so Mount Shasta is at the base sales tax rate, which is 7 1/4. State 6, there's this 1% for local agencies, and then there's this 1/4%. I'm not really clear what that is. Might have something to do with transportation. But 7 1/4 is the base rate throughout California, from what I understand. So we're there. About 10 years ago or more, we approved the 1/4 sales tax for the library. That currently brings in about $400,000, almost $400,000. So you have an example of what a 1/4% sales tax brings in. So if there is no negative effect of a sales tax increase, one of Jeffrey's concerns, if you assume that it doesn't slow down purchases, which you shouldn't because it will, people will avoid, there'll be some avoidance of sales tax by shopping in Weed or going up to Medford, burn the gas. That doesn't make sense to me, but people do that. And there'll be a somewhat downward push if the higher the sales tax rate is. So you 1%, are you going to get $1.6 million or 1% sales tax increase? I would doubt it. I think it would have a somewhat deleterious effect on sales, a full 1%. So that is a discussion. And do we want to do it here in November? Because Muriel's budgeted 1% for the following fiscal year, and I'm thinking we need at least 0.25% voted on by the people. Thoughts?
Some years ago, we talked about, well, this is probably more than 6, maybe 8 years ago, we talked about I think, what was it called? Quality of life tax measure, something like that. And we were trying to make it broad enough so that it would be a 50+1, but also attractive. I don't know whether we succeeded in saying that that could be 50+1 or whether it would be a 2/3. Does anyone else remember? Was anyone else on the council then? Muriel, you were here then.
You know, I vaguely remember that, but I don't remember if you actually got it to the ballot, did you?
No, we didn't.
All right.
Yeah, I don't remember that discussion off the top, but I don't remember much.
Basically, I think we should put a 1/4% sales tax, a 1/4% sales tax, and a $5 drainage fee tax on this November's ballot. It will get decided. It will have a discussion because there will be a general ballot discussion. Just like any ballot, you've got the things that come out, and here's all the pros and the cons, and you will have a full distribution of what this is and why we need it. And you know, we, in the meantime, maybe we launch a newsletter that it goes out monthly that we reach people. I don't know. Let's not get off track, or I won't get off track. You will get it in the document that comes out with the voting guide.
Yeah, and there'll be a lot of people voting in November.
I think I agree.
You'll get a lot of people voting because it's a big election, and you'll have a good sense of where the people stand, and that's not a bad thing, you know.
At least we'll know.
We'll know, and a 1/4% sales tax. You know, it depends on what kind of spending you do, but if you're the type of family or individual that spends about $1,000 on sales taxable items, 1/4% sales tax is $250 for the month.
Right.
And that's not much for the year. So if you go out to eat a lot and do a lot of purchases of non-food things, and you're up around $2,000, it's $5 for the month. So $60 for the year. Not a lot of money. It could be sold that way, but we're not allowed to sell it that way. And
Are you saying a general or a specific?
General.
General.
yeah,
Thank you.
We're leaning general here.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Lot
For-
better chance of passing.
For the November election, there are going to be at least, hopefully, 3 people walking around door to door campaigning for election or re-election.
I don't have that time.
That ain't happening.
I might have.
Talking with voters.
The power of social media.
Can I, just a little bit of input, which I believe City Manager Todd had put in his report, is that what needs to be, I think, brought forth is that the expenses for public safety is, at least salary-wise, is 60% of the budget in the general fund already. And in total, 50% of the total cost in the general fund is already public safety. So it would make sense, at least in my mind, that it be a general, because most of the money is already going to go to public safety. And I don't know if people realize that. I think is something that needs to be pointed out.
To the chair. I was going to touch on this before Jeffrey did his mic drop moment, but I do like the specific increase in sales tax specific to public safety, because I think it pulls on a lot of heartstrings of our community. We are becoming aware we aren't outside of this bubble of anti-crime. You know, crime does exist here. We're seeing it, hearing it in our streets, and fire certainly is on all of our minds. If we did a special election, I would probably lean more towards that specific public safety, because it does speak to a lot of people rather than just like, oh, you know, they're just going to use it to, you know, they can fill in the blanks a lot easier with their own narrative rather than knowing that it's going to go towards something that is usually near and dear to everyone's heart. So.
And it has to go with that.
Right.
The chair?
Yeah.
It certainly makes sense that if you focus it on fire and police, on the safety, everybody knows what that is. It's not a complex subject. But chief and firefighter, I apologize, but I don't really think we have a problem in police and fire.
No, I don't either.
And consequently, where we do have problems, I mean, bigger problems, we can't spend that money over there. If that was what passed, we
But what it would do is, with the dedicated funds that are coming in, if the tax passed, it needs to go directly, you know, to public safety. So therefore, the spending in the general fund would then be picked up because that tax passed, and then we have more wiggle room with the general fund.
Okay, pardon me. I clearly do not understand something. This falls under the, which one of these statements is true? Because I'm not sure. When we have line items in the general fund under police and fire, anything from salaries and benefits to cars and tack gear and overtime. And if we pass a safety, just safety, fire and police raise of whatever it is, that money can, first of all, has to pass by 2/3 instead of half, but it likely would, but it has to stay there. It has to stay. We can't take the money that's already there and move it someplace else, can we?
Yes.
If you nod, I like it.
Yeah.
So Bureau would be reporting another fund. So we have all these funds, like 50 of them, right? And all these little funds, and you lose yourself in it. And so a lot of times they're tied to revenue of some sort, whether it's the parking fee for the DIAC, you know, that's their money. So now you're going to have approximately 400,000, let's say it's a quarter percent sales tax, $400,000 going into this fund for public safety, these particular departments, and therefore is 400,000 less stress on the general fund. So I know it's like kind of a shell game.
It's just like a shell game to me. And
It is, but it's a beautiful shell game because
people love public safety.
well, no, I get it. No, I think that's correct. I just don't understand how that's legal.
Well, that's how you're supposed to do it. If you have specific revenues coming in, it has to be a fund,
that it goes to.
and it's accounted for separately.
Because the library was originally part of the general fund, and
That's
now it
correct.
has its own fund because of the 1/4% designation.
Well,
Library's
wait,
a really good example.
yeah, so library has to be spent with library.
Yep.
But we weren't spending anything before there, were we?
Yeah,
Yeah, through the general fund.
through the general
But
fund.
we didn't take anything out of the existing library and move it elsewhere.
We created a special tax fund that measure had to go to, that is separate from the general fund.
That lessened the expenses in the general fund for the library because now the special tax was going to pay for all of those things.
No, great, I get that. Thank you.
So on paper, there'd be this fund with the special tax, with the safety sales tax money right there. So call $400,000 and expenses would go against it. And it'd be less pressure on the true general fund via the $400,000 monies coming in from this quarter sales tax. The best example to understand is just look at the library money. It's really, it's an equivalent situation.
Okay.
Library's getting $400,000. The safety departments will get $400,000. They counted separately. Counted for separately.
I understand. Thank you, I get it now. I was a little slow.
No, you don't like it though. You think it's
I'm not.
little.
I'm just trying to understand.
These people here know about generally accepted accounting principles and all that. And
It's really fun.
It's like our grant as well.
very, very technical.
It is like a grant. It's new money that wasn't accounted for previously. Yeah.
I think before we were to vote on this sort of thing, I would like to have input from electioneering experts who have gone through this sort of process before. There are companies that specialize in this. I certainly remember hearing from some of them about the rigors of trying to get 2/3 pass versus 50+1. It could be that they'll come back and say, hey, if you make it for public safety,
I'm all in.
it's, you got an 80 or 90% chance of getting your 2/3. But if they don't, and they say, you know what, it might be better just to do the 50+1, I'd like to know what the odds of success are.
My thinking, and I'm not married to either one of these scenarios, but my thinking is we have an entire community full of public safety that would do our own marketing. They would do it with their families. They would tell their friends how important this is to our community. If we just do a 0.25% of increased sales tax that doesn't have the heart in it, I think it would be harder to pass.
So Jeffrey's leaning towards putting up a quarter cent sales tax, general sales tax for November. You prefer that to be a specific tax? And then would you actually prefer it to be maybe 0.5%?
Yeah, I would say 0.5 to a full percent.
Ooh.
Or
That's aggressive.
Or 3/4%.
That's aggressive.
I would also remind folks that Wairika has the same tax measure going for 1%. We don't know if it's going to pass.
Is that in November?
Yeah, it is.
They're doing the same discussion, same exact discussion.
I guarantee, yep.
Well, we have some clarification regarding we have some clarity and direction regarding the stormwater enterprise zone, so to speak, and we're going to have an agenda item at the next meeting and try and make some decisions as to where to go based on Ken Kellogg's. Hopefully he can make it. Here, regarding sales tax, we're kind of stuck. We have Mr. Stearns, who I think wants to hold off until later, in general.
On the sales tax, I'm suggesting that rather than having a vote on that tonight, we can put it on the next meeting and get.
Well, it definitely has to be an agenda item. This is a preliminary to firm agenda item.
And get input from some of the experts.
So does the city manager or anyone else, staff-wise, have experts that can comment on 50% general sales taxes versus specific sales taxes? That you could have maybe even just write something up and send it to us via email, whatever.
My again, getting back to the idea of a plain old sales tax, normally you hire a public research firm that goes and, does the public outreach with the public and then with business owners to find out what resonates. And you need more time for that. When it comes to public safety, I think that's a message that we can get out pretty quickly. In terms of how large we go, I think 1% is too high. Especially if we're going to try to float something else, but I do believe a half cent, 3/4 is like, I don't have the magic 8-ball to tell me whether the outlook is bleak or whether it's going to be rosy, but I think that has a better chance on a short runway.
Okay, so, good, so you guys are in the same camp. I'm starting to lean in your direction, so this very...
It's growing on you.
Yeah, somewhat Socratic discussion is helping out the situation. Jeffrey's at 0.25%, throw it up there and see what happens. So...
I drool afterwards.
Yeah.
Higher than that, I just drool.
So 0.5% would be, assuming no ill effects on sales volume, would be $800,000.
One more point,
And that
sorry.
would...
You are
that
going
would-
to have, adverse effects.
So
you
call
might
it
be at
700,000.
Maybe 6.
Also, I would like to ask the chief, how is your police station holding up, and how is the fire department building itself?
Ouch.
So for the police department, the building's been in disrepair for a long, long, long time. I mean, we're having to fix stuff all the time. The HVAC system is completely inadequate for the people. We've had to bring in extra additional portable air conditioners because we have so much equipment running in there. It's old, it's hard to fix up, it's cramped. The other thing is, I know for the fire department, they got to measure what type of chains they can put on their equipment because they can't hardly get into the engines. It's very, honestly, I don't know why we haven't had an engine crashed into yet in that location on Main Street, even with the clearance there. You got engines going in there that I don't know how they get them in there. There's literally an inch on either side of the mirror trying to get these engines in. And the thing is, the engines aren't getting smaller and the equipment's not getting smaller. So honestly, the city would be nice to start looking at infrastructure designs to get a new public safety center where maybe you could combine fire.
And thus the 1%.
Well, and one other part of that is we've already had to shore up a sinking floor in the fire department because it was collapsing.
So that sounds like liquefaction underneath. You got mud, water. It's just no good. Okay.
And it's
I know about that. That's Mount Shasta. It's parts of Mount Shasta is just a little too swampy to build on, but we did.
And if I might, Your Mayor, the other station down behind the visitor center still got a hole in the wall from where somebody drove into it. So we still have a whole nother station that we got to fix.
Oh, the one by the visitor
Yeah,
center.
station number 2. So yeah.
So lots of repairs. So that leans towards 1% in that would be 1 million plus, and that would give us room to do serious repairs. Okay. Mr. Collins, go ahead.
This is the chief and city manager. It seems that the long-term fix for in and out fire department layouts where the fire truck pulls on one side, goes out the other side, is up at the National Guard facility when they vacate that.
Oh, they have.
But they haven't vacated the lot.
Not fully.
Okay, are they planning on it?
That's my understanding, but they're not willing to give it up.
Right.
I mean, we have the underlying property, but they have the right of refusal through the government accounting office for, I think it's another 50 years, isn't it?
It's pretty close to 40.
Yeah.
Well, so should we be able to get that property, vacate one of the prime corners in this town, sell that to a developer, move and take those monies and go develop up at the National Guard Center.
We tried getting facilities up over the last year and a half. So co-facilities in that CAL FIRE and the city were going to go in there. And the GAO said no. And, when you're going up against the feds, and our contact is now gone, getting somebody at the feds to pay attention to you is, let's just say it's north of difficult.
Come on. Are we good? All right.
Is that a sign this topic is done?
Yeah.
That idea is over?
I don't know where Redmond would be on this, but I'm going to say we have an agenda item and go for the gusto here and decide if we're going to go full 1% because Councilmember Clore thinks that the safety department personnel will lead the charge to get this voted on and approved. Just to give you some numbers, assuming there's no deleterious effect on sales, which there would be at 1%, but let's say there wasn't, that's about 1.6 million. Let's say they're after deleterious effect, it's more like 1.3, 1.4. That means instead of $3 million of the general fund being used strictly for these departments, that would actually drop by 1.4 million, could go to things like Public Works. And it's a substantial, and drainage, right, which is Public Works. And it's aggressive, but I don't know. Sounds like marketing is the key, and sounds like there's some enthusiasm for marketing this. Okay, that's going to be the agenda item. 1% specific tax, and there's going to be a lot of people voting, and we certainly will know what the will of the people would be, assuming we approve that item to go on the ballot. With that said, we've exhausted our agenda items, and Ms. Stearns.
I'd like to ask when the parquet ordinance is coming back to the council. A business person asked me about that this past week.
Knock out the short-term rental, which will come at the next meeting. And first reading. And I've got Jeff keyed up to do that parklet right after that.
Yeah, I'll talk to you about it in a second. Okay, so we have outside meetings. I think in the time frame between last meeting and this meeting, there was library action, and that was already discussed. So what's going on, folks, in the public, Nolan Tam is working mainly with Evelyn Callis, who knows, I met with her to discuss the Nolan Tam latest plan. And she has very, very detailed knowledge of what needs to be done, what should be done, what is best. And you're telling me that since I met with her, you had a subsequent meeting, right?
Today, about 2 hours.
And you felt it was very fruitful, right?
Yeah, I think, there are some real minor tweaks, but we've got everything where we essentially want it, but enough to go out and price things and then come back and say, okay, we don't want new carpet. We can live with what we got, that kind of stuff. It's all minor.
Right. So she mentioned that to me. So we're at the point where the details of the design have been narrowed down, and now Nolan Tam will go out and see what it'll cost or approximately cost to build this, and that would be the next step. So we're moving along. And any meetings for you? No?
No meetings for me.
No. Okay. So with that said, we are going to conclude this meeting without objection at 7:49 p.m.
So doesn't